There Hashem, bless God Almighty. Bava Metzia 21a, Chapter 2, Mishnah. Some fines belongs to the finder, others must be announced. There is no contradiction of the previous teaching. If witnesses testify that they saw the debt being paid, that the lender is not believed, the note is valid. Otherwise, we believe the lender and the note is invalid. The following articles belong to the finder. If one finds scattered fruit, scattered money, small sheaves in a public thoroughfare, brown cakes of pressed figs, of baker's loaves, and strings of fishes, pieces of meat, fleeces of wool which have been brought from the country in ripe state and bear no mark which could be identified, bundles of flax and stripes of purple, long strips of wool dyed purple, a common article in the days of the Mishnah, colored wool, all these belong to the finder. The person who finds these articles need not announce them because they bear no marks of which the loser could identify them and has no right to keep them because the owner has given hope loss of recovering them. This is the view of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says whoever has it in something unusual must be announced. And if this instance, if one finds a round of figs containing a part chart or a loaf containing money, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says new merchandise need not be announced. Gemara, if one finds scattered fruit, what is the quantity of fruit in the space meant? Rabbi Yitzhak said a kab, a measure, within 4 cubits. What kind of case is meant? If the fruit appears to have been dropped accidentally, even when there is more than a kab, it should belong to the finder. And if it appears that it deliberately put down, then even if there was a smaller quantity, it should not belong to the finder. The loser would have no means of identifying them. Ukba B. Hama answered, we deal here with the remains of what was scattered on the threshing floor to collect the cob scattered over a space of 4 cubits. It's troublesome as people do not trouble to come back and collect it. The owner also abandons it, but it is spread over a smaller space. The owner does not come back and collect it and does not abandon it. Rab Yirmiyah inquired, how is it one finds a cab scattered over the space of 2 cubits if the reason why the cab within 4 cubits belongs to the finder, it's troublesome to collect, and therefore the cab within 2 cubits, which is not troublesome to collect, it is not abandoned, should not belong to the finder, or the reason which the cab within 4 cubits that is not worth the trouble of collecting, when spread over such a space, and therefore within a cab within 2 cubits, which is not worth less than the trouble of collecting, it is abandoned and should belong to the finder. Again, how is it if one finds 2 cabs scattered over the space of 8 cubits? It is a reason why a cab within 4 cubits belongs to the finder, and that is troublesome to collect, and therefore with 2 cabs within 8 cubits, which are more troublesome to collect, are even more readily abandoned and should not belong to the finder. The reason is the case of a cab within 4 cubits that is not worth the trouble of collecting, and therefore 2 cabs within 8 cubits, which are not worth the trouble of collecting, are not abandoned and should not belong to the finder. Again, how is if one finds a cab of poppy seeds scattered over a space of 4 cubits? Is the reason why a cab of fruit within 4 cabs within 4 cubits belong to the finder and is not worth the trouble of collecting, and therefore poppy seed, which is worth the trouble of collecting, is not abandoned and should not belong to the finder, or is the reason in the case of the cab within 4 cubits that is troublesome to collect, and therefore poppy seed, which is even more troublesome to collect, is abandoned and should not belong to the finder. And again, if one finds a cab of dates within 4 cubits or a cab of pomegranates within 4 cubits, is the reason why a cab of ordinary fruit within 4 cubits belong to the finder, and it is not worth the trouble of collecting, and therefore the cab of dates within 4 cubits or a cab of pomegranates within 4 cubits, which also should not be worth the trouble of collecting, is abandoned and therefore belong to the finder. Or there's a reason in the case of the cab within 4 cubits is troublesome to collect, and therefore a cab of dates within 4 cubits, a cab of pomegranates within 4 cubits, which are not troublesome to collect, are abandoned and should not belong to the finder. The question remains unanswered, and it has been stated, 21b, anticipated abandonment of the hope of recovering lost articles is Abaya maintains no abandonment. Unconscious abandonment. The article is found before the loser becomes aware of the loss, and the circumstances are such that the loser would have abandoned the hope of recovering lost article had he known that he lost it. And the finder has the right to keep the article. But Rav maintains it is an abandonment, and the article belongs to the finder. If the lost article is a thing which has an identification mark, all agree that the article anticipation of abandonment by the owner is no abandonment, and even in the end we hear him express regret at his loss in a way that makes clear that he had abandoned it. It is not deemed to be an abandonment for him even when the finder took possession. Before the owner had heard to be in despair of it, or if he had no right to it, because it assumed that the loser of it became aware that he lost it, he will not give up hope of recovering. But he says to himself, I have recognized it by the identification mark. I shall indicate the identification mark and shall bring it back. And lost articles found in the intertidal space of the seashore or ground which is flooded by a river, then even if it has an identification mark, divine law permits the finder to acquire it, as we shall explain further on. And they differ only with the article. Abai says it is no abandonment because the loser does not know that he lost it. Rabba says it is an abandonment because he becomes aware that he lost it. He gives up hope of recovering it. It says to himself, I cannot recognize it by the identification mark. It is therefore, if he had given hope from the moment he lost it, mnemonic consisting of Hebrew initials, teachings that follow. Come in here, scattered fruit. In the case of the loser, why did not know that he lost it? Rabbi Ukba Bihama already explained that we deal with the remains of what is gathered by the threshing floor. The owner is aware of his loss. Come in here, scattered money belonged to the finder. Why, in the case of the loser did not know that he lost it? There also is in the case of Rav Yitzchak said, man also feels for this person at frequent intervals. Here too, we say the man usually feels for his person at frequent intervals and soon discovers his loss. Come in here, round cakes of pressed figs of bakers' loaves belong to the finder. Why is this not the case of the loser? They did not lost it, and they're also become aware of the loss because the lost articles are heavy. Come in here, strife of purple, they belong to the finder. Why? In not which case the loser did not know that he lost them, there also becomes aware of his loss because his articles are valuable and he frequently feels for them. As Rav Yitzchak said, come in here. If one finds money in a synagogue or house of study or any place where people congregate and it belongs to them because the owner had given up hope of recovering it, is this not the case where the loser did not know that he lost it? Rabbi Yitzchak said people usually feel for their purse while at frequent intervals. Come in here. From the time that people are allowed to appropriate the gleanings of the field after the gropers have gone through, whereas he asked what is meant by the gropers, Rabbi Yochanan answered, old people who walk leaning on a stick. They treat the ownerless goods which are not need to be tithed, although the owner may have known a loss, he will abandon hope when he knows. Mass, what is the anticipation of abandonment is not valid. The last in the succession of gleaners, how should it be so? Granted that the local poor gave up hope of finding any gleanings. There are poor people in other places who do not give up hope. I will say, seeing that they are local poor, those in the places give up hope straight away. As they say, the poor of the place have already gleaned. I, to whom they know belong, the owner feels sure that he will recover from them, even though it is anticipated abandonment. Come in here, cut figs found on the road, even if they are found beside a field covered with cut figs, and also figs under the fig trees that overhangs the road may be appropriated for the finder without him by guilty of robbery, and they are free from tithing. But olives and carob trees are forbidden. Now, the first part of the mission implies no contradiction to Abaye. They are treated as ownerless goods which are not to be tithed. Okay, let's see. Being cut figs, they are being valuable. They are under constant supervision. Whole figs are also known to drop. But the last part of the Mishnah, which teaches that olives and carob beans are forbidden, implies a contradiction to Rabbah. Rabbi Abahu said olives are different from other fruits because one recognizes them by their appearance. Although the olives drop to the ground, the place of which is known. But if so, one should apply to the whole figs in the first part of the Mishnah. Rabbi Papa answered, figs become filthy when they drop to the ground. Come in here. From thief takes from one, gives to another, and where a robber takes from one, gives to another. 22b, 22a. And if one is in the Jordan, takes from one and gives another, and they have been taken, it's taken, and what is given has been given. Now this is obviously regards to things taken by a robber by the Yarden, because the owner sees them as they are taken, or any other river which carries away goods or anything else. The recipient has the right to keep the goods. Bava 114a, he sees them being carried off and he abandons them. And he gives up hope, but as regards the thief, does the owner give him steal so that we could say that he has given up hope? Rabbi Papa explains, refers to armed bandits, but is not the same as robbers. There are two kinds of robbers. Come in here, a river has carried off someone's beams, timber, or stones, and has deposited them in the neighbor's field, and they belong to the neighbor because the owner has given up hope. See, the reason why they belong to the neighbor is that the owner has given up hope, but ordinarily they do not belong to the neighbor. Here we deal with the case where the owner is able to retrieve them. In regard to ordinary loss, the owner is not likely to become aware of it at once. It would belong to the finder that it contradicts the review of Rava. So the ordinary owner never gives up hope and has not even anticipated an abandonment. There is no contradiction to Rava. But if so, I must refer you to the last part of the quoted teaching. If the owner was running after them, the neighbor must return them. Now, this is a case where the owner is able to retrieve them. Why state he's running after them? They should belong to him even if he does not run after them. Here we deal with a case where the owner is able to retrieve their property. With difficulty, he runs after it. We conclude that he's not able to give up hope of the recovery. If he does not run after it, we conclude that he has given up hope of the recovery. Coming here, in what circumstances is said that one sets apart the heave offering without the knowledge of the owner of the offering is invalid. If one goes to the neighbor's field, collects the produce, and sets the heave offering without permission, the owner objects to the action and considers it robbery. The offering is not valid, but if not, it's valid. And how can one tell if the owner considers it robbery or not? If the owner, arriving and finding the person in the field, says to him, "You should have gone and taken the better kind of produce," or for the heave offering, the offering is valid if there is better kind to be found in the field, but if not, it is not valid. The owner collected more of the produce. Add to the offering, it is valid in any case. We see that if there is any better kind in the field, offering is valid, but if so, surely at the time when the offering was set apart, the owner did not know. Rather, explained according to Abai, the owner made him set apart the offering to his agent. This conclusion, indeed, from here we assume that it does not make him his agent. How could the offering be invalid? Did not the divine law instead, ye say also to include your agent, must say, when you set upon your offerings with one's knowledge, so must your agent set apart your offerings with your knowledge. Therefore, we must deal here with the case when the owner made him his agent, said to him, "Go and set apart the heave offering," but not say, "Set it apart from this kind." And usually the owner sets apart the heave offering from the medium kind, but the other person went and set it apart from the better kind. Whereas the owner arrived and finding him in the field and said to him, "You should have gone and taken it from still better kind." In such a case, a lot that is better kind found in the field having offered valid. If not, it is not found. Amar Bar Mar Zutra and Rav Ashi once entered the orchard of Mari B. Isaac, whereupon his factor brought dates and pomegranates and offered them to the visitors. Amar and Rav Ashi ate them, but Mar Zutra did not eat them. And while Mar B. Yitzhak arrived and he found them, he said to his factor, "Why you bring up for the rabbis some of the better kinds of fruit?" Whereupon Amar and Rav Ashi and Mar Zutra, "Why does the master not eat now? For it has been taught as better ones can be found, the offering is valid." Mar Zutra answered them, thus said Rabbi, "You should have gone and taken better ones," and declared them valid observation. But in regard to the heave offering, because it is fulfillment of a divine commandment, and he wishes to offer better ones, but he may have them out of courtesy. Coming here, if the dew is upon them, the owner is pleased. In Scripture term, if water put upon the seed applies to it, if they turn dry, then even the owner. Vayikra 11:38, and it becomes capable, become ritually and clean at the time when the owner heard the dew, but the dew and is pleased if the dew came upon it at first.